Continuação da leitura do livro The New Map, Chapter 1, The Gas Man. A leitura desse livro será feita em inglês, pois o livro está em inglês. Então, o capítulo 1 diz: If you want to get to the beginning of the shale revolution, pick up Interstate 35E out of Dallas and head north 4 miles, and then take the turnoff for the tiny town of Ponder. Past the feed store, the Whitewater Tower, the sign for the Cowboy Church, and the donut store that's closed down. Another 4 miles, and you are in Dish, Texas. Population about 400 people. You end up at a wire mesh fence around a small tangle of pipes with a built-up step ladder. You are there. The SH Griffin number 4 natural gas well. The sign of the fence tells the date, drilled in 1998. That was not exactly a great time to be drilling a well. Oil and gas prices had cratered with an Asian financial crisis and the ensuing global economic panic. But as SW Griffin number 4 would change things more than anyone could have imagined at the time. The well was drilled mainly with standard technology, but also with experimentation and ingenuity, despite considerable skepticism. The small band of believers working on the well were convinced that somehow you could extract natural gas from dense shale rock in a way that was commercially viable, something that the petroleum engineering textbook said was impossible. More than anyone else, the unshakable conviction belonged to one man, their boss, George P. Mitchell. He had been a true believer for a long time. To grasp the intensity of that conviction, you have to understand that the road to S.H. Griffin number 4 really begins much longer ago, in a tiny village in Greece's Peloponnesian Peninsula. In 1901, an illiterate 20-year-old shepherd named Savas Paraskevopoulos decided that his only ticket out of a life of poverty was to emigrate to the United States. By the time he ended up in Galveston, Texas, he had been rechristened Mike Mitchell. He eventually opened a laundry and shoeshine shop that just barely supported his family. His son George enrolled at Texas A&M University, where he studied geology and the relatively new discipline of petroleum engineering. George was poor, and this was the first of the Great Depression. To pay his way through school, he sold candy and embossed stationery to the other students, waited on their tables, and did tailoring on their clothes. He also captained the tennis team and came top in his class. After World War II, Mitchell did not want to work for anyone else. With a couple of partners, he opened an office as a consulting geologist atop at Houston drugstore. By the 70s, he had built a sizable oil and gas company, though with ups and downs along the way, but he had an unusual proclivity, a natural liking for a bad thing. He favored natural gas over oil. Around 1972, he came across The Limits to Growth, a book by an environmental group, the Club of Rome. It predicted that a soon-to-be overpopulated world would run out of natural resources. Intrigued, he became increasingly interested in the environmental issues. Natural gas became for him not only a business but also a cause, for it was cleaner than burning coal. Sometimes he would call up people and berate, like yell at someone. Then, if he thought that they had said something nice about coal, he would shout, Fueled by his new environmental ethos, he launched a totally different business, creating a wooded landscaped 44 square miles master-planned community north of Houston called the Woodlands. Its slogan was "The Livable Forest." Today, it has a population over 100,000. Mitchell involved himself in the decision-making, down to the details of the flower beds and the trees, and populating it with wild turkeys, a type of bird, until one got shot. Yet he could hardly ignore his energy business. He had a big problem. Mitchell Energy was contracted to provide 10% of Chicago's natural gas, but the reserves of gas in the ground to support that contract were running down. Mitchell Energy needed to do something. That is when Mitchell stumbled across a possible solution. In 1981, he read the draft of a journal article by one of his geologists, and the article offered the hypothesis that ran counter to what was taught in geology and petroleum engineering classes. It suggested that commercial gas could be extracted deep underground from very dense rock, denser than concrete. This was the source rock, the kitchen, in which organic material was cooked for several million of years and transformed into oil and gas, or gas. According to his textbooks, the oil and gas then migrated into reservoirs from which it could be extracted. It was thought at the time that oil and gas might still remain in the shale, but could not be produced on a commercial basis because they could not flow through the dense rock. The draft article disagreed. Mitchell, beset, liked to cause problems for something. Beset by worries about the contract for Chicago, he became convinced that here might be the road to his company's salvation. There had to be a way to prove the received wisdom wrong. The test area would be Barnett Shale, named for a farmer who had come out to be the area by wagon train in the mid-19th century, 5,000 square miles in extent, a mile or more underground, sprawling out beneath the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport and under the ranches and small towns of North Texas. Year after year, the Mitchell team toiled away to break the shale code. Their goal was to open up tiny pathways in the dense shale so gas could flow through the rock and into the well. To do that, they applied hydraulic fracturing, later much better known as fracking, which uses cocktails of water, sand, gel, and some chemical injected under high pressure into rocks that would break open tiny pores and liberate the gas. Hydraulic fracturing is a technology that had been developed in the later 1940s and has been commonly used in conventional oil and gas drilling ever since. But here the fracking was being applied not to a conventional reservoir, but to the shale itself. Yet time was passing and much money was being spent, with no commercial results. Criticism mounted inside the company. But when people dared to suggest to Mitchell that his idea would not work, that it was only a science experiment, he would say, "This is what we are going to do." And since he controlled the company, Mitchell Energy went on fracking in the Barnett, but still with no good result. By the mid-1990s, the company's financial position was precarious. Natural gas prices were low, Mitchell Energy cut its spending and slashed its workforce. The company sold the Woodlands for $543 million. When he announced it was passed to him for review, Mitchell jolted, "Okay, but sad." He later said, "I hated to sell it," but he had no choice. The company needed money, but Mitchell would not bend on shale. One thing that characterized him, on his granddaughter once said, was stubbornness, the quality of being difficult. If he had doubts, he kept them to himself. By 1998, the company had spent a lot of money on the Barnett, as much as $250 million. When analysts did forecasted of America's future natural gas supplies, the Barnett did not even make the list. All sorts of experienced, educated folks wanted to bail out of Barnett, said Dan Stewart, one of the believers as Mitchell. They said we were throwing money away. Nick Steinberger, a 34-year-old Mitchell manager in the Barnett, was not among the skeptics. He was convinced that there had to be a technical solution to commercially produce from shale. Moreover, natural gas prices were low, and he was also trying to bring down the costs of drilling a well. To do that, he had to attack one of the biggest costs, that of guar. That's a plant. Guar, mostly imported from India, is derived from the guar bean, a seed that can be eaten. It is used extensively in the food industry to assure consistency in cakes, pies, ice cream, breakfast cereals, and yogurt. But it has another major use in fracking, in a jello-like slush that carries sand into the fractures to expand them. But guar and the related additives were expensive. At a baseball game in Dallas, Steinberger ran into some other geologists who had successfully replaced much of the guar with water, but in another part of Texas and not in shale. In 1997, he experimented with their water recipe on the couple of shale wells without success. Steinberger got approval for one final try. This was the S.H. Griffin No. 4 in dish. The team was still using water to replace most of the guar, but this time they fed in the sand more slowly. By the spring of 1998, they had the answer. The well, said Steinberger, was vastly superior of any other well that Mitchell had ever drilled. The code for shale had been broken. The new technique needed a name. They didn't want to just call it water fracking. That would have been too prosaic and even boring. So they called it slick water fracturing. Like very smooth. The company quickly adapted the technique to its wells in the Barnett. Production surged. Yet, if it was going to develop shale on large scale, Mitchell Energy needed a lot more capital, which is simply they did not have. Reluctantly, George Mitchell started a process to sell the company. Personally, it was a difficult time for him, although he could take a great satisfaction that his intuition and conviction had been proven right after 17 years. He was being treated for prostate cancer and his wife was slipping into Alzheimer's. There were no buyers. The sales process was called off and the company went back to work. Over the next 2 years, Mitchell Energy's gas output more than doubled. This caught the attention of Larry Nichols, CEO of Devon Energy, one of the companies that had passed on Mitchell's Energy during the earlier sales process. Nichols challenged his own engineers. Why was this happening? If fracking was not working, why was Mitchell's output up? Devon's engineers realized that Mitchell's Energy had indeed cracked the code. Nichols was not going to let the company get away a second time. In 2002, Devon bought Mitchell for $3.5 billion. At that time, said Nichols, absolutely no one believed that the shale drilling worked, other than Mitchell and us in Devon. But shale drilling needed another technology to be economic. This was horizontal drilling. It allowed operators to drill down vertically, today as much as 2 miles, to what is called the kick-off point, where the drill bit turns and moves horizontally through the shale. This exposes far more of the rock to drill bit, thus leading to much greater recovery of gas or oil. While there was experience with horizontal drilling, the technology did not become more prevalent until the late of 1980s and early 1990s. This was the result of advances in measurement and sensing, directional drilling, seismic analysis, and in special motors that would do a remarkable thing. A mile or two underground, they would propel the drill bit towards once it had made its 90-degree turn and started moving horizontally. And it required one other thing, extensive trial and error. Devon was now positioned to try to melt horizontal drilling with fracking. In the hot summer of 2003, a large group of government officers, officials, engineers, experts, and executives from the natural gas industry were convening 750 miles to the north in a cavernous conference room at the Denver Airport, Marriott. The objective was to reveal the results of a major study on the future of U.S. natural gas. The conclusions were deeply that would do a remarkable thing. Well, actually not really. It was pessimistic. After languishing for years, natural gas prices had suddenly moved up sharply. Demand was rising, especially in electric power. Yet, despite a doubling in the number of active drilling rigs, the report said the sobering fact was that sustained high natural gas prices were not bringing the expected increase in the supplies of natural gas. In short, the United States was running out of natural gas. New technologies and non-conventional and unconventional gas, the study chairman told the group, would hardly have any impact. Shale gas did not even get a fleeting mention on the list. A professor from the University of Texas showed up to object. He noted that this estimate for non-conventional was only about a third of another projection. That's a hell of a big difference, he cautiously commented. Their chairman disagreed. The dissenting projection of larger potential supply, he said, was flat wrong. Somebody's dead wrong here, aren't they? Retorted the professor. Almost everybody in the room was convinced that it was the professor who was dead wrong, and that the United States faced a permanent shortage of domestic natural gas. The main way to make up for the shortfall was to look overseas to import liquefied natural gas, LNG, and the United States would have to do something new in its history, like increasingly depend on large imports of LNG from the Caribbean, West Africa, the Middle East, or Asia. The country, it was thought, was destined to become the world's largest importer of LNG, ever more dependent on global markets for its gas, as it already was for its oil. Yet that was July 2003, while the natural gas study was being deliberately in the air-conditioned ballroom in Denver. Devon's crews were working away in almost 100-degree temperatures down in Texas, methodically drilling what eventually totaled 55 wells. Larry Nichols, the Devon CEO, missed the Denver meeting because he was focused on Devon's drilling program. As he drilled each well, and as we saw the continuing production of the well, we realized a little more each day that this was indeed a game changer. Nichols recalled, There never was a single eureka moment. There were lots of small eureka moments as we gradually improved our technology. By the end of that drilling program, they had the proof. Devils engineers had successfully yoked together the two technologies, slick water fracturing with horizontal drilling, to liberate natural gas imprisoned in the shale. The rest was history, Nichols would later say. It was although a starting gun had gone off, news of the breakthrough set off a frenetic race among other companies to get their piece of the dance rock before anyone else. These were not the very large companies whose logos and familiar at gas stations across the country. Thus, majors were still divesting from their own land U.S. production because they thought it was a dead land or a dead end. Instead, they were putting their money into the Gulf of Mexico deep water and into multi-billion-dollar mega projects around the world. As they saw it in the US, onshore was too peaked over, too obviously in decline, to provide new resources of the scale they needed. The onshore was left to the independents, companies focused on exploration and production, unburdened with gas stations or refineries, more entrepreneurially, faster moving, and with the lower cost structures required to make money in the increasingly depleted onshore. Independence itself was pretty broad term, ranging from companies with multi-billion-dollar valuations down to small scrap explorationists. The race was to lease as much promising acreage as possible from ranchers and farmers, and then begin the process of proving up the resource. All shales, it was soon learned, were not the same. Some were more productive than others. One wanted to find the sweet spot, the potentially most productive acreage, before anyone else. The advancement of this particular revolution were the thousands of landmen who knocked on screen doors and left notes in rural mailboxes and got landowners to trade their heretofore worthless mineral rights in exchange for the possibility of future royalties and maybe to become rich. The independents carried the race to other shales, to Louisiana and Arkansas in Oklahoma, and then to what would prove to be the greatest shale gas play of all, the mighty Marcellus, a thick bedrock a mile or more underground that stretches beneath western New York down into Pennsylvania and Ohio, and on into West Virginia. It also reaches into Canada. The Marcellus Shale would turn out to be the second largest gas province in the world, and possibly the largest, and another shale formation called the Utica lay below parts of Marcellus. What particularly drove the independents to move as fast as possible was that great motivator known as price. After decades of being cheap and plentiful, the Wall Street Journal reported that U.S. natural gas is the most expensive in the industrialized world. Right prices motivated a lot of experimentation, investment, and risk-taking that would not have been undertaken at lower prices. It involved mastering a production profile that differed from that the conventional gas and the oil. Initial output from a well was high, but then declined much more rapidly than in a conventional well before leveraging off. This created the need to continue drilling new wells in what came to be described as a manufacturing process. The year 2008 was the moment when the bell rang. Then That year, U.S. natural gas output went up instead of down, and had been the general expectation. That abruptly caught the attention of the majors, the big international companies. Some of the majors began to shift some of their investment back to the onshore United States. In some cases, they bought independents, and a number of international companies from China, India, France, Italy, Norway, Australia, Korea, they paid up to become partner of U.S. independents and to provide them with the cash they needed to continue their frenetic advance. With this new perspective, estimates of the U.S. gas resource base rose dramatically. By 2011, the Potential Gas Committee, which analyzed the physical resources for the United States, projected the recoverable gas resource 7% higher than it had a decade earlier. That year, President Barack Obama declared, "Recent innovations have given us the opportunity to tap larger reserves, perhaps a century worth, in the shale under our feet." The number have continued to go up, and by 2019, the Potential Gas Committee's estimate for recoverable natural gas reserves was triple what it had been in 2002. Gas production was rising so fast that it became known as shale gale, like a very strong wind. As gas moved from shortage into oversupply, the inevitable happened. Prices plummeted, like they fall suddenly. And the combination of abundant supply and low price changes the overall U.S. energy mix, with gas share of total U.S. energy rising. The most decisive change was the electric power sector. King coal had long been the dominant source for electric power, a position that had been bolstered by the government policies in the 90s and 80s, which promoted coal as a secure domestic source of energy and restricted the use of natural gas for electric generation. Because at the time, too, that country was thought to be running out of gas. In the 1990s, before shale, gas never accounted for more than 70% of generation. But with the arrival of shale, gas was highly competitive on price, and environmental opposition had made it virtually impossible to build a new coal-fired plant in the US. As late as 2007, coal generated half of the US electricity, and by 2019, it was down to 24%. And natural gas was risen to 38%. That was the main reason why US carbon dioxide emissions dropped down to the levels of the early 1990s, despite a doubling of the US economy. A position that had been bolstered by government policies. And that's it. Any thought of expensive LNG imports had been banished. The challenge was no longer how to eke out scarce new supplies, but rather how to find markets for the growing abundance in expensive natural gas. There was just so much of it. That's it, so let's continue on chapter 2, that will be the discovery of shale oil.